Awesome, awesome. Welcome to day 2. Always a tough morning crowd. Usually people don't get in until noon. But we are going to start off by welcoming this amazing panel. And closest to me, Kraken's elitist. Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Kraken and what you would like to do more at Kraken?
Sure. So, hey everyone, I'm Mark Greenberg, Managing Director for Canada here at Kraken. And maybe what I'd love to do more is everything except the regulatory part of my role. So.
I'm Morva Rohani. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Web3 Council. We're a lobbying organization for the sector in Canada. What I would like to do more is to actually see people develop the technology, so like attend more hackathons and events like that.
Hey everyone, Eric Richmond, President at Coinsquare. Coinsquare is now an operating subsidiary of WonderFi, which is listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange under WNDR ticker symbol. What I'd like to do more of is probably continue to launch new products within the regulatory regime here.
Hi everyone, my name is Kunal, Bhasin. I'm a director with KPMG and I co-lead the Crypto Asset and Blockchain Center of Excellence for the Canadian firm, but I work globally with all our KPMG member firms across the world. What I would like to do more of is work with a lot more of the Web3 companies, especially DeFi and DAOs and foundations, and very soon, hopefully, we start doing that a lot more.
That's awesome. Kunal, why don't we start with you? Can you tell us, what's the most pressing matter when it comes to the regulatory regime here in Canada when we're talking Web3 and blockchain?
So I think one of the most pressing issues is, from a stablecoin perspective, we need a lot more regulatory clarity and also proper treatment of stablecoins from a regulatory perspective. So I think there's still some more clarity that's outstanding there. And I know the Web3 Council and the CBC have been pushing for that clarity with the regulators more. Another thing I would say is there's, I believe, a disconnect between what the regulators' expectations are and what some of the standard-setting bodies for accounting firms and consulting firms like us, because regulators may want trading platforms and other VASPs to follow certain requirements and comply with those reporting and disclosures. However, without proper standards being set by those standard professional bodies like the CPA Canada, AICPA, as well as PCOB, I think without those standards in place, it's hard for those reporting requirements to be met adequately, and that results in the risks not being addressed appropriately across the board.
Morva, you schooled me backstage on stable coins and the regulatory system. Why don't you tell us what are some of the pressing matters you see, especially in Web3?
I can speak to why I think stablecoins are important and why regulators care so much about it. So I would say that, with the collapse of Terra last year, FTX's native token, the potential depegging of USDC, they're obviously concerned from a consumer protection perspective. So there's a lot of pressure on them on that side. But I also think that there's a lot of institutional interest in stablecoins at the same time. So they're being proactive and reactive in some instances. So, but at the same time, because we're not seeing a lot of movement from the federal government right now on just providing the clarity that Kunal mentioned that we need right now, a lot of these agencies and regulators aren't clear on who's supposed to be doing what. So securities regulators have stepped in and said, we're going to do this job. And what it's resulted in is just an overly complex regulatory regime that has captured things that it shouldn't be capturing, such as stablecoins. And so we'll continue to see that until we see the federal government step in and say, hey, no, these are payments instruments, should be captured under the Retail Payments Activities Act, for instance, and not under securities regulations. But on the flip side of it, as I said, there's institutional interest on things like stablecoins, so they're feeling that pressure to kind of, somebody has to provide this clarity, right? So we're seeing other regulators, for instance, our major banking regulator, OSFI, 2 weeks ago just issued some guidance that actually provided some clarity to stablecoin issuers and to banks on, how stablecoin issuers or how banks can be exposed to stablecoins. So we are seeing some proactivity, but I think until the federal government steps in and provides that clarity to these agencies and these regulators, we'll continue to see like a disjointed approach.
Mark, I feel like I'm getting some dirty looks from some of the Krakenites that are dying to hear you speak. Do you want to add on to that, or even tell us what are some of the regulatory challenges for a large exchange in Canada?
Yeah, let's start by celebrating the wins. We have one of the most clear regulatory pathways anywhere in the world, and that is just awesome, and it helps global organizations like Kraken invest here in Canada. So I want to start there. And then I hope, as a Canadian, that we'll continue to invest on that regulatory clarity and use it to take over the world as Canadians. And what does that mean? It means we have to do more to take our early advantage in things like ETFs and change some of the tax rules so that we can offer those ETFs in the US and in other markets. That would be amazing for Canada. It means that we have to fix the access to banking problem that we have here. It's a serious issue. We need the big 5 banks to ban crypto companies. And at the end of the day, we're still going to need access to fiat for quite a long period of time. I hope less and less each year. And we're going to need access to banks. And then finally, if we really believe that crypto is the replacement for fiat, we need to be able to use it in an easier way for purchases, and that means that we have to change the tax rules and create a capital gains exemption. It is way too hard to pay tax on your crypto. It's totally unnecessary for small purchases of a coffee with crypto or things like that, and we've got to get rid of that. So those are the things I'm hoping for. Stablecoins important, short term. We've got to be thinking longer term than that. That's my point of view.
I love it. Long term, get rid of taxes is what I took away from that conversation. Eric, how about you? What are one of the most well-known exchanges here in Canada? What are some of the regulatory challenges as you've been through the early days of crypto here?
Yeah, so I mean, Coinsquare's been in the country operating here since really 2014, really the longest or oldest domestic exchange in Canada. And similar to what Mark, alluded to, like the regulatory environment is clear here. Coinsquare today is Canada's only crypto native zero dealer, which is the new name for IROC. For people who want to know what IROC is, it regulates the dealers in Canada, the securities dealers in Canada. And so Coinsquare is still today one of the only crypto native dealers. And we've really continued to build on that, and we're looking to continue to build different services. Now there are a lot that still needs to get done. Like I agree completely with Mark. There's stable coins, there's taxes, there's other areas that there's work to be done. But even within the current crypto trading platform regime in Canada, it's great to see that platforms have now come in through the door. They've started to file undertakings. The platforms who can't comply have pulled out, but there still is a lot of work to be done within that regime to get people through the funnel. To become zero dealers. There's still work to be done with decentralized platforms and other sort of non-custodial exchanges, to really ensure that Canadian investors are protected and then they're afforded the investor protections that sort of every securities dealer provides in Canada. If you trade with your TD or any of the big 5s. And so that's there's still work to be done, but it's great that we have a strong regulatory environment here that's with clear rules at this point.
Now, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one more thing and emphasize on one thing, Eric, that you mentioned was that the regulatory environment for trading platforms is pretty clear in Canada. And we know some of the global exchanges have left the Canadian ecosystem, citing regulatory concerns. But guess what? There are regulated exchanges in Canada that are operating, and these are the exchanges that want to do the right thing, comply with the regulations, and they're not citing regulatory concerns. They're working with the regulators to push the agenda forward and not pulling away. So I think that's a very important point that I wanted to hone in on from a regulatory standpoint.
I love it. It seems like the whole panel agrees that Canada's regulations are clear. Morva, where do we stack up with the rest of the world? I don't know if we're just saying that because there might be some MPs in the audience that we're trying to suck up to our regulators. But where do we stack up to places like EU that have MiCA? We've seen that Dubai has its own regulatory authority. Where's Canada stacking up against the rest of the world?
So I'll start off by saying I agree with everybody that, we things are more clear than they are south of the border, that's for sure. And we are ahead of the game in some respects. I would say a lot of it is because things just lined up properly for us. We had Quadriga that happened a few years ago, so regulators had to move very quickly. In terms of, but right now I think we're at the stage where we need to see the next evolution of the current regulatory regime. And to what Eric was saying, I do think that there are problems that we can fix within the existing regime, but at the same time, in terms of our competitiveness versus Europe, I mean, they came up with a bespoke regulatory regime. A bespoke regulatory regime is always going to be better than trying to fit something new into an existing framework that is intended for other things, right? And that's the approach that we have right now. So I mean, if we want to be competitive with jurisdictions like Europe, we do have to think about, what is that, like, what are the specific differences with these assets, what's unique about them, and how can we create a new framework or a new approach for them. And that is really the only way we'll be competitive in the long term if we're thinking big picture. And that's what Europe has done, and that's what we would ideally like to see. Not to be cynical, I just don't think we're going to be seeing it for a while in Canada, just because they've created this framework and they seem committed to seeing it through. And there are solutions for that. We have our members and other players who are willing to be at the table and willing to be a resource to regulators. So I think we can absolutely work with what we have until maybe in the future we'll see something that's a bit more competitive.
Eric, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to add that the securities regulators sort of are using the rules and the framework that they have today within their power to regulate the space. It would be really great if politicians, we can get some bipartisan support for really bespoke rules. We have seen, like, the regulators, even in the stablecoin guidance, they pretty much said, the securities regulators, that they're filling a need while some federal regulatory bodies work to sort of finalize the regime around stablecoin. So, for any politicians that might be here, anyone who wants to write their MPs, like, that would be really important if we can get bespoke, like, regulatory frameworks. I would really continue to drive the industry forward in a positive way here.
Mark, I want to talk to you because I think each year we have a theme. Last year was a lot of talk about regulation. I think after FTX, we got into this conversation around consumer protection. It feels like Canada already had their FTX moment in the past with Quadriga CX, as well as Einstein Exchange. What are we doing and what are exchanges doing to better help protect our consumers here in Canada, especially from an exchange lens?
Yeah, let me start. Eric, I'll just correct the record. Kraken is the largest Canadian exchange. I'm just going to say that. We have more employees, we have more volume, and it's just, and we've been here longer, since 2011. So I'll
see
just
the numbers.
Let's
see the numbers.
So sorry. I couldn't resist. Global exchanges like Kraken have always taken consumer protection, security, and safety seriously. And it's a shame that not everybody who operates globally does that. I hope we'll continue to see exchanges like Kraken and others in Canada and around the world continue to call out players that are just not playing fairly for consumers. And we've done that over time, and we will continue to do that. Rules like the ones in Canada, which are not that hard to follow, not perfect, not great, problems, challenges, lots to figure out, are, I think, important way to help build that consumer trust as well. And so that's why we're happy to have doubled down on Canada and to continue to invest in this awesome market.
Awesome. If we could just clear out a little room in the middle of the audience there, I think we could move some chairs around and have a little celebrity boxing if you guys want to. We got 11 minutes left. I think we can pull it off with some simple planning, Tracy. Bitcoin has been labeled as the currency of freedom. We saw here in Canada with the Freedom Convoy and people not being able to donate using centralized crowdsourcing. We saw in Ukraine, you couldn't donate to help Ukraine use military efforts to combat Russia. How do we balance this ability to support things that we believe in, Morva, but also keep this cryptocurrency away from illicit actors? How are we looking to balance that?
I think the best way to do that is provide a regulatory framework that balances consumer investor protection with responsible growth and fair competition, because then we will have market players who will be incentivized to participate and who will be incentivized to be compliant. And the best thing we can do is to ensure that we are promoting regulated platforms to Canadians and that they understand, and we're providing that education, and that's what the council is here for, and that's what hopefully some of our agencies are there for as well. Right now, I would say regulators and similarly, elected officials have this policy of like containment of this industry. I don't think that's very sustainable in the long term. They did that with a convoy last year. Obviously, there was a response, an industry response to that that wasn't ideal, at least from a user perspective. And what we need to really see is governments and regulators take the approach of focusing more on responsible growth. And so that way folks have choices, or consumers have choices between, maybe I want to hold some of my assets, self-custody them, maybe I want to hold some of my assets in Coinsquare or Kraken, and trying to be cool here. And so I think if we see a more balanced approach from governments and regulators, naturally we'll see that progression in consumer protection measures in the long term. And we also have to listen to, I would say regulators also have to listen to industry to do things that work. So for instance, the Ontario Securities Commission has like a $30,000 purchase limit on certain assets, for instance. There's like no data to back up if this even works. And I would say industry participants have plenty of data and experience now to to provide that feedback and say, this isn't actually helpful, this is what you need to do. So even from a consumer protection perspective, we talked about bespoke regulatory approach. We also need bespoke consumer protection approaches, because these assets are different and they require a different perspective.
Now, you see a lot of these companies, so I was going to go to the exchanges, but I don't want to put them in a tight situation. The exchanges were kind of seen, last year the government reached out to them, wanted information when it came to the Freedom Convoy. How do you tell your customers that are trying to launch certain products in Canada how to balance this consumer protection out with some of the illicit activity that they might be exposed to?
I think most of our work is relevant for a lot of the institutional side. So what happened on there was more on the retail front. What I would say is, a lot of users are buying crypto, Bitcoin, and others on these exchanges, and they're buying it either from an investment standpoint or for some other use. But education to them about not your keys, not your coin. Like, that's what this industry is built on, and that's the freedom that something like Bitcoin gives them. I think educating them on just being able to use wallets, being able to secure their own keys, even if it's a portion of their assets, just being able to use that and experience what freedom can look like for them is key. I remember when we initially proposed at KPMG for either self-custodying our own NFT or adding crypto to our balance sheet, like, we got our leadership using Ledger wallets, we got our leadership using MetaMask wallets to help them understand and get them the experience to what it is like using this technology, what can it enable for their clients, for the institutions that they speak with day in and day out, whether it's from a competition standpoint or complementary service offerings that add more revenue streams for them. So I think that education component of not your keys, not your coin is pretty key for a lot of those players that think that may not necessarily understand that buying a Bitcoin on the exchange is giving them that freedom today.
There's a lot more fraud outside of crypto than inside crypto,
Exactly.
and it's really important to say that. Gift cards are full of fraud. Nobody's talking about taking away my Walmart gift card because there's fraud in the space. We need to solve the fraud problem. We need to solve scams. We need to solve the issues that are specific to those things and stop talking about it as a cryptocurrency problem itself. All money has frauds and scams. We still need money, and we still need cryptocurrency.
Interesting enough, Eric, lawmakers have said that we need a national strategy when it comes to blockchain and self-custody. How do you feel about that as an exchange that's onboarding clients in a safe manner? How do you feel about, customers being their own bank, going into a little bit of a nuanced world like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, for every investor, there's, you got to understand the asset class, you got to understand the risks, you got to understand the benefits and risks associated with custody. Keeping your coins on the exchange has certain benefits. You're able to trade quicker. You might be able to take advantage of certain, insurance benefits that come along with custodying your assets on chain. If for example, you don't have a good disaster recovery plan for yourself in case of a disaster, obviously the exchanges have policies and procedures to enable us to provide those funds to your estate. But on the flip side of that, yeah, definitely self-custody. There's huge benefits. That's I think the reason why we're probably all on stage is that it provides freedom for everyone to be their own bank, and to take advantage of that. And so it really just comes down to just educating yourself and educating our clients to understand how this technology works, and then figure out what your right mix is personally and what you feel comfortable with from a custody perspective.
I would say the role of policymakers is to not pick winners and losers, is to provide choices. And I think Canadians, when it comes to this space, they're still learning. Obviously, why we're all saying education is important. But they need to have as many safe access points to this ecosystem and to the financial services sector as possible. So as I mentioned before, whether someone chooses to hold a little bit of their assets in, to self-custody it and hold a little bit of their assets in Kraken, a little bit of their assets in Coinsquare, that's a choice that every Canadian should have. And I think that's ultimately what the report was intending to imply anyways. I don't think they meant to pick winners or losers or to say whether or not Canadians are ready for these things or not. I think as long as they're educated and they understand what's going on, they should be able to kind of pick and choose what they want to do with their assets.
Mark, I'm curious to ask you, many of your international counterparts have decided to leave Canada, especially Ontario. What are your thoughts? What was the reason why Kraken decided to double down and stay here in Canada?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, Kraken has a long history in Canada. We've been in Canada since 2011. We have more than 250 employees here in Canada. We have Canadian dollar pairs. So we always started under the hope and the promise and the thinking that we were going to continue to stay in Canada. And the reality is, while we don't love everything that came out of the PRUs or in the regulatory regime, we found a way to make it work, and we really wanted to make it work. And that's what's allowed us to continue to stay. I think companies like Kraken are going to continue to invest in regulatory regimes around the world. Hopefully they are thoughtful, clear, progressive, and somewhat harmonized around the world. That's probably not going to happen fully, but we're going to continue to try and make it work in every jurisdiction that we can.
Awesome. Eric, I'll start with you. Chainalysis just came out with a report, we have a couple minutes left, that said illicit activities down in the cryptocurrency space. What are some of the financial crime concerns that you have as an exchange? What are some of the things that you're worried about, especially for Canadians?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I missed one part of your question.
What is the biggest financial, scams? What are some of the things that you're worried about?
Yes, thank you. Their scams are still unfortunately rampant, but to Mark's earlier point, they're not necessarily rampant in our space. What's great about blockchain in particular are their tools provided by Chainalysis, provided by just the technology itself. You're able to actually combat fraud a lot better than you can in other industries, right? If someone gives you cash, you don't know where that cash came from. You can actually figure out exactly where that crypto that you received came from. So combating is what our exchange is very focused on. We've really built out both our fraud, AML departments to ensure our clients are protected. There's a ton of these romance scams out there that people hear about in the news, a ton that are just always happening. But I think we've collectively, the Krakens, the Coinsquares, all the exchanges have really done a much better job of improving our game to find these things. The scary part is what happens is you tell a client they're being scammed, and they're so convinced that it's not a scam, right? That's the scariest part, where they're like, it is not a scam. We've seen the indicators so many times, and those So those are the interesting things. But like I said, there's tons of ways we've been combating this. We're continuing to learn. We're continuing to implementing new tools and processes. And so yeah, that's how we're continuing to help combat some of this.
Everyone's looking for love, Eric. Everyone's looking for love. Okay, we're gonna have a rapid fire. Everyone gets, we're gonna play a game of overrated, underrated. So I'm gonna give you a term. You let me know if it's overrated or underrated in the Canadian landscape. Kunal, we'll start with you. Travel rule, overrated or underrated? You can give one sentence as to why you think that.
Underrated. I think there's still collaboration that needs to be done across the exchanges and other service providers to get there where we want to.
Awesome. Morva, NFTs, overrated or underrated?
I would say underrated because regulators have yet to wrap their heads around what to do in that area.
Awesome. Eric, staking, overrated or underrated?
Underrated. Still a ton to do in the staking space, especially at certain different levels of government and regulatory bodies.
Awesome. Mark, leave it to you. Satoshi Nakamoto, overrated or underrated?
I'm not even dignifying that with an answer.
Thank you so much. I see why they brought me out to moderate this panel between Coinsquare and Kraken. They needed 250, bulking season to moderate this panel. Thank you so much, everyone in the audience. Hope you enjoyed this panel.
Thank you, Stephen.
Really great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.